we're going to focus on how to prepare the share capital note and the retained income note, right? Okay, so it says that you are presented with the information taken from the financial records of Dun Limited. The financial year end is 28 February 2018. So that's very important, right? We need to know when our year ends and when it starts. So let's go and draw our year somewhere here, because when we do the questions we'll probably need it. So it ends on the 28th of Feb 2018. It was started on the 1st of March 2017, right? So that's our financial year. So let's go first and prepare what? The share capital note. Okay, so if you go down to your share capital note, the first thing that we need to go and find is the authorized share capital, right? So let's go and find out what the authorized share capital is. So under our information, they have told us that the authorized share capital consists of 750,000 ordinary shares. So we're going to go and write 750,000 shares. And remember, your authorized share capital is simply how many shares the company is allowed to issue, right? The maximum amount of shares that they can sell. They can never sell more than that. Then they told us that on the 1st of March 2017, 60% of these shares were in issue. So what is the 1st of March 2017? The 1st of March 2017 is the beginning of our year, right? So this will go to the beginning. The number of shares will go to the beginning. They said 60% of those shares were issued at the beginning. So we are going to write shares issued at the beginning, and the number of shares would be 450,000 shares, right? 450,000 shares that was issued at the beginning, right? Then the next thing that we can go and read about is that they told us that the following figures were taken from the financial records. Remember, what are your financial records? Your financial records are your rand amounts. So here we can see that the ordinary share capital, we have an amount on the 28th of Feb 2017, 3,215,000. Remember, this is the closing balance from last year, so it becomes my opening balance for this year. So this is my balance at the beginning of the year in rands, 3,215,000. So at the beginning of the year, I have 3,215,000 rands for my shares issued at the beginning. Then to find how much each share was, right, I'm going to take the 3,215,000 divided by the 450,000 shares, and that will give me 7 rand 14 cents per share, right? So that's how much I charged per share for the shares that I issued at the beginning of the year. Then what's next? The next thing they tell me is that on the 1st of November 2017, so that's somewhere during the year, right? Because remember, our year is from March till Feb. So somewhere during the year, on the 1st of November 2017, the company issued a further 80,000 shares at 9.50 rand per share, right? So I'm going to go and write issued during the year. The shares were 80,000, right? 80,000 shares at 9.50 rand. At 9.50 rand. So now if I take my 80,000 times my 9.50 rand, that would give me 760,000. Right, so that's my shares issued during the year. Then what else do I have? On the 28th of Feb 2018, 75,000 shares were repurchased at a price of 10.40 rand per share, right? So shares repurchased during the year were how many? They were 75,000 shares. At how much? Remember, now our knowledge of when dealing with the buyback needs to kick in, right? So remember, I taught you that when you deal with the buyback, there's 3 prices that you need to know about. You need to know your total, right? The amount that we paid in total for these shares when we're buying back these shares. That total is going to be split into what? It's going to be split into your average price, which will go where? Which will go to your ordinary share capital note. And then it's also split into your what? It's also split into your price above average which will go to your retained income note, right? So let's go and understand what this price is. So if you repurchased at 10 rand 40, this 10 rand 40 is the total amount that you paid for those shares, right? So this 10 rand 40 would be my total. So my total amount that I paid for the shares is 10 rand 40. But then remember, what am I preparing? I am preparing the ordinary share capital note. So what do I need? I need the average price, right? So that's what I need to go and calculate. I cannot use this total because the total doesn't go to my what? Doesn't go to my ordinary share capital note. Remember, I told you it goes to your what? To your cash flow statement. But because we are preparing the ordinary share capital note, this total must be my average price. I need to find, the amount that's going to go to my ordinary share capital note must be my average price. So I now need to find my average price. And how did I say we find the average price? To find your average price, you are going to go and draw your year, right? Your timeline. So the 28th of Feb 2018, and then the 1st of March 2017, right? And then you're going to go and see on what date did the buyback happen. So the buyback happened on the 28th of Feb 2018, right? So this is where my buyback happened over here. This is where the buyback happened. And then what we now need to go and determine is that before the buyback happened, or by the time that the buyback happened, how many shares did the company have in issue by the time that the buyback happened? So we can see that the buyback happened over here, right? So we want to see by the time that the buyback happened, which is the 28th of Feb, how many shares did we have in issue? So we are looking at from here up until the date of the buyback, how many shares were issued. So we're looking from the beginning of the year up until the date of the buyback. And remember, we know that at the beginning of the year, we had how many shares in issue? We had 450,000 shares in issue here. And how much did we get for those shares? We got 3,215,000 here at the beginning, right? Then we also know that during the year, which was around the 1st of November, right? So somewhere here on the 1st of November 2017, we went and issued more shares. We issued 80,000 more shares. And how much did we get for those shares? In total, we got 760,000. So now, can you see, by the time that the buyback happened, right? Remember, my buyback happened over here, right? So by the time that the buyback happens, how many shares did we have in issue? We have these shares at the beginning of the year, and we have these shares during the year, right? On the 1st of November. Those were the shares that were issued by the time that the buyback has been, by the time that the buyback happened, right? Or by the time where we have our buyback. These are the shares that were issued before the buyback, right? So now what we do is we are going to find the average of those shares, right? So we need to go and find the average of those shares. And how do you find the average? You take your rand amounts, so the 3,215,000 at the beginning plus the 760,000. Then you divide it by what? You divide it by the number of shares. So at the beginning we had 4,500,000. The 450,000 or 4 million? 450,000. 450,000 shares plus the 80,000 shares, number of shares. So that's 80,000 shares. So now my average price, if I go and put it into my calculator, right? If I go and put that into my calculator, I'm going to say 3,215,000 plus my 760,000, then divided by 450,000 plus my 80,000. That's gonna give me 7 rand 50 cents. So my average price that I'm going to use for what? For my buyback is going to be what? 7 rand 50 cents. So the average price is 7 rand 50 cents that I'm going to use in my ordinary share capital note for my buyback. So now I go to my note and I say at 7 rand 50. Then I take my 75,000, I times it by the 7 rand 50, and that gives me 562,500. right? Then the end is pretty simple, right? I add up all. Remember that the buyback is a minus, right? So I minus all my, so I'm going to say issued at the end. So I'm going to add all my shares, right, to get my share amount. So I'm going to take the 450 plus the 80 minus the 75. Remember, buyback is always a minus. So at the end, I have 455,000 shares. And then I take my 3,215,000 plus my 760,000 plus my 562,500 is 3,412,500, then divided by 455,000, that will give me 750. Right. So now how do I determine if my note is correct, right? So I want to teach you something that will help you determine whether your note is correct, or more especially your average price, right? The average price that you got over here. So this average price, how would we double check whether my average price is correct? How I would double check the average price is that you do this. Go and write your year, then 1 March 2017. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go and put in your during, right? Your shares issued during the year. You go and look at what date your shares were issued during the year. So we saw that the shares were issued during the year on the 1st of November 2017, right? I'm going to put that in my timeline. So somewhere here, 1 November 2017, my shares were issued, right? This is my shares were issued during the year. This is my during. So now what I do is I compare my during and when my buyback happened, right? So when did my buyback happen? My buyback happened on the 28th of Feb 2018, right? So let's go and put the buyback there. So my buyback happened over here. So now, if your buyback happens after, can you see that my buyback happens after? My during was on the 1st of November. My buyback happened after on the 28th of Feb, right? 2018. If your buyback happens after your during, this means that the average price of your what? Of your buyback, so the average price of your buyback would be the same as the average price what? At the end of the year, right? So can you see that here? My average price of my buyback is 750, and it's exactly the same as the one at the end of the year because my buyback happened after my during. So this means that my calculations were correct because my buyback and my shares at my average price at the end of the year are exactly the same. Because if your buyback happens after your during, then the average price of your buyback will be the same as the one at the end of the year. But if, let's say, your buyback happened before, right? So let's say our buyback happened on the 1st of October 2017. Now can you see that my buyback is here? It's before my during, right? It's before my during because my during happens after on the 1st of November. If your buyback happens before your during, then the average price of your buyback would be the same as the average price at the beginning of the year. So it will mean that the average price that you get here for your buyback must be the same as the one that you would have for your shares at the beginning of the year. So it would be 7 Rand 14 cents instead of 7 Rand 50 if your buyback had happened before your during. So that's how you go and double check your work. Right.